All right, let's get started, man. I'm beyond excited to have our guest today on the show. It's Tim Heyl out of Austin, Texas. I'm pretty sure the dude is global, but he's centered in Austin. And we're going to dig deep into his business. You know, he started out a lowly, slugging away 169 hours a week real estate agent back in the day, and he's built something pretty awesome. So, Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and why don't you start off? You know, give a couple 3 minutes on kind of who you are personally, and in a real brief intro on the business, what it looks like today, real high level.
Okay. Well, so like you said, I'm here in Austin, Texas. I was born and raised. I got my real estate license my senior year in college, and fell back on becoming a realtor when I couldn't get a job after college. And so it wasn't necessarily something I thought I would do forever, but it was something that I thought I would do in the short term. And I had always had hopes and dreams to build a business, and that, you know, the idea of building a business was really exciting to me. My dad's an entrepreneur, and when I read that The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, that book kind of triggered for me. Okay, well, I can be a real estate agent and a business owner. And this is what that would look like. This is what that path would look like for me. And so I set out to do that, and I had no idea what to do. You know, when you read a book, it's really good because it gives you this like big high level vision, but doesn't necessarily tell you like what to do on Tuesday morning when you show up at the office. Right? And so I would show up day in and day out, and honestly got frustrated with myself because I wasn't making progress. I was doing a lot of the things that I think most of us do when we get into real estate, which is waste a lot of time, not getting into action, and not being consistent with the right activities. And so it was a couple of sales seminars and a lot of failure and frustration over the first 6 to 9 months that really helped me to finally figure out what I needed to do every single day to actually start building this path. And I don't know if you're familiar with the saying, the Oregon Ducks, the Oregon football team has this big thing painted inside their locker room, and when they're coming out of the stadium, it says "Win the day." And win the day is something that I've become very passionate about over time, which is just every single day before the day starts, being clear about what makes today a win. And actually making sure that when the day ends, you could check a box that says, I won the day today because I completed that thing, whatever that thing is. And as soon as I kind of figured that out early on, I started building traction in my business.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I almost forgot to ask you the question, and I know your answer. Are you prepared to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about your growth journey in business?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All of it. It's all on the table.
Cool. Start out, kind of get the personal development and ball rolling here. Can you recall a quote, that kind of in the early days kind of got you through maybe some of those tough times, a motivational quote?
Yeah. This is not going to be profound, but it's meaningful to me. This is something that a friend of mine told me a long time ago. He said, "It's just real estate." And I know that is the least profound. This is definitely not a Tony Robbins quote here, but what it always reminds me of, if you set out to build a business, I don't care if it's in real estate or anything else. If you set out to build a business and you succeed, it is going to be the most stressful and challenging thing that you will probably ever do. And constantly reminding myself it's just real estate has helped me to not be a diva about it, you know? So when it feels like the world's crashing down, or it feels like, you know, everything's going wrong, or, you know, somebody just quit, or, you know, whatever it is, I have this in my mind, it's just real estate. And I sit back and I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it is just real estate. Like, you know, I go back home to my family and they could care less, you know, it's like, well, the things that matter most, this is fun and exciting doing this thing, but at the end of the day, it's just real estate. And if you let it affect you, even the challenging parts, if you let it affect you like most people do, it'll actually cause you to have a bad life, not a good life. Anyway, it's just real estate.
Yeah. If you're watching, I'm going to put your name by that. So I know someone else told you that, but that's, I'm writing it down if you're watching the video version of this podcast. So take us back to, when you decided to build a team and maybe when that decision happened and what those first few years of maybe you knew how to hire an admin or a buyer agent, maybe you didn't. How messy was it back then? Give some sort of paint the picture for us about the early days.
It was beautiful. It was all beautiful. There's nothing messy about it. No, I'm kidding. So I will say that I decided from day one I wanted to build a team, and I think that had a lot to do with kind of my quick growth curve or whatever in this, is that I didn't figure out 5 years in that, it would be nice to build a team. I was super, super fortunate to have read the book that talked about leverage, building lives worth living through creating leverage. And I was super fortunate to have mentors and agents around me that were already on that path from day one. So my mindset from day one was there. And that was huge. But the know-how was definitely not there. And so my first year in the business, I was a solo agent. I was not rookie of the year. I think I sold like 15 to 20 houses. And it was a good year, but nothing spectacular. My first hire was that year, but it was a virtual hire. I hired just a transaction manager that was in my city to start taking over that 80%, that what I'll call $10 an hour work, so that I could continue to keep my focus on being a great agent and going out and generating business and all the stuff that comes with that, kind of the defense. I leveraged out from, honestly, almost from day one. And then in year two, I actually hired a part-time assistant, and I didn't have a lot of money. In fact, I think I had didn't even really fully have enough money to be living on my own in an apartment. So, I did not have a lot of money in my bank account, but what I had was a lot of listings. I had a huge pipeline that I built up, and I had a lot of confidence in where I was going. And not enough to hire someone full-time, but enough to hire someone part-time. And so what I did, it was really scary to me, the idea of getting someone to quit their job to come work for me. So what I did is I actually found somebody in my real estate office who was not extraordinarily successful, but was a great administrator. And I just said, hey, what would you think about working for me part-time? You can still keep doing your real estate business, but what would you think about working for me for 8 to 12 every day? And I'll just pay you hourly from 8 to 12. And so that person came in and essentially played defense on my systems. So they would now organize my call list for the day. They would write my personal notes, to the leads that I generated that day. They would organize my CRM and set everything up they would set my pre-listing packets up, or my listing presentations and everything. They'd prepare me so that I could just come in and execute. I still had that virtual transaction manager. So I kind of dipped my toe into each step because I had never hired anybody before. And then what happened was that relationship with that person went so well, they said, well, I'm not really selling houses anyway. And so what about if I work full time? So as I started making more money, I brought that onto a full-time relationship. My third year in the business, I brought that transaction manager in-house. So I hired somebody that would do listing management, transaction management in-house. So now I had 2 admin full-time, and I also hired a buyer's agent. So I had 3 people. So we had this tight team of 4, and it seemed like everything was just running smooth. The wheels were rolling, everything was clicking, and I was running, 100 miles an hour, and I was even named the #1 real estate agent in my city that year. I mean, I was really, really booming. And basically within the course of about 3 weeks, two or 3 weeks, all 3 of them quit and went and started a team on their own without me. And it was like the biggest, not only hit to my ego, but also just like the most stressful, probably the most stressful time of my career, even now, even to date. I was about 3 years in. I was at what I thought was the height of my career, just totally dominating. And my assistant had literally left a note taped to my door. And I usually got in there really early because back in those days, I wouldn't work on the weekends. Even from day one, I didn't work on the weekends, but I was Monday through Friday, I was in early, out late. I mean, I was really putting in the time up front. And I remember getting there at like 6 a.m. and there's a note on my door, and I pull it down and I open it. It's like 3 pages of single spaced, typed 12-point font letter to Tim about how horrible of a leader manager I am, and how this person did not want to work for me ever again, that they were done. They were not going to come in today or ever. And here's all the reasons why. And as I read the letter, all of the reasons were true. Nothing of it was so horrible, like, oh my gosh, Tim's a horrible person. But it was things like, losing my temper, or always taking the customer's side without ever like interrogating what, different perspectives of what happened, or being quick to being frustrated, or just moving around too fast, not actually caring about my employees and what was important to them, but just being focused on goals and getting to the next level. I was so laser focused on a goal, which was awesome, but I had literally narrowed the focus like that to where anybody that was slightly outside of that was more of like baggage and was going to get run over than anything else. And that was a huge problem. I read that letter and it hit me hard. And it also, it wasn't necessarily a turning point overnight for me, but over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, I completely had to rebuild the way that I thought about building a business, the way that I approached hiring and working with people. And I had to figure out how to integrate being focused and goal-oriented with being people-centric and a leader. And, being a mega producer and being a leader are two totally different things. And, some people have the great fortune of having a bunch of money where they can just be the leader and invest in everything else. But when you're building a business from scratch, you have to be both. You have to be that producer at some point and be that leader. And I failed at that miserably. And, but I learned from it and I came back, and a lot of great coaching, a lot of mentorship, to guide me through. Sometimes it felt like therapy, but I came out the other side. Probably the next 18 months were the most stressful 18 months of my career. I think I had 100 listings or at least 100 clients at the time, and we weren't electronic. Everything was in folders. And what had happened was the other 2 people left to go work with that individual. And so I was left with the number 1 real estate team in the city of Austin and nobody to facilitate it. And so I just remember the phones for weeks and weeks. The phones literally would not stop ringing. I didn't know where anything was. It was a complete cluster, and I honestly didn't know how I was going to be able to keep it up. And so what I did was I started just hiring random people and putting them in place, and that created even more of a disaster than probably if I didn't do that. And over the course of about 18 months, I learned from failure, from mentorship, and from seeking out the right training. I learned how to focus on hiring the right people, how to train them up, how to be a leader in business. And ultimately, I got out of production so that I could focus more and more on leadership and less on being busy and being in production. And so about 5 years ago, I stopped selling houses and I just focused on building the business, and things got better and better and better from there.
What year was you left with 100 listing folders? What year was that?
That was 2012. So it was in my 3rd year of real estate.
Okay. So that I was going to go into the failure. So you kind of took it there and you talked about the lesson, but lifting out of that. So after, in that 18-month period where you're sort of bad hires, you're figuring things out, talk about that. If you could give advice on, you've done it all wrong and done it all right, and it's still a business. So it still is hairy.
Yeah.
But give some perspective into the nuts and bolts of really finding the right person, talent. I saw you speak at Boomtown Unite, and talent versus non-talent. I mean, we took that and it's hanging on our wall now.
Nice.
Right behind where we interview people.
I love it.
So, and then you also spoke about at the conference, and it really hit me. And I'm 11 years in, and it hit me like it was the first time I heard it. potential emerging and proven.
Yes.
And, because you don't really have, a $20 million in the bank to just go out and, fill up your team salary cap style. You've got to go with potential a lot of the times. So talk through some of those lessons. Like, what advice could you give someone who's hiring their first assistant, their first buyer agent, so they don't have to do it wrong?
Yeah. Well, so this might come out, hopefully this won't be like word vomit, but I have all these thoughts coming to my mind as you ask that question. So let's start with this, is that, being a small bootstrap business, you're right. You tend to focus on potential talent because it's cheap. You get a lot of value. If you find an amazing college grad is going to go take over the world one day, but he doesn't know that yet, or she doesn't know that yet because they just graduated from college, you might get that person for 40 grand a year, and they might be really worth 250 grand a year. And that's kind of the hope when you're hiring potential talent, is that the very nature of them being potential means you get that special deal. The challenge with potential talent, of course, is that in the same way, Lars, that you've probably figured this out, and I know I've certainly figured it out, is when you haven't been there yet, you're going to fail your way to learning it and understanding it. And so potential talent's going to fail their way on your dime, which can be okay. And it can also be challenging. It can also be a struggle. So, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, even more lately in my career, is just the value in hiring emerging and even proven talent. I used to always be really proud of just hiring potential talent because they don't come with bad habits and you can train them your way and all these great things. And I've really learned the value of finding people who have a track record of success in the specific thing that you're bringing them on to do, and bringing them on. And here's the thing is they typically are expensive, and that is a challenge. But the more clear you are about where you're going, and the better you can articulate that, the cheaper they become. Meaning some of the most proven, experienced, just total badasses are willing to take massive steps backwards because they believe in you, your dream, where you're going, and what you're willing to do to get there. And most likely, they're not in a place right now where they're attached to that. And the more clear you can articulate that with passion, the better chances you're going to have of skipping the roll of the dice on potential and being able to work with emerging and proven. And so that being said, it doesn't mean that working with potential talent is a bad thing. We hire potential talent still today in our company. It's just a big lesson I've learned is how much faster you can move when somebody comes to the table on day one telling you what we need to do because they've already been there in that specific skill set or that specific role.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing because I've never heard it said the way you just said it. And looking back on when I was building my team and I was convincing, folks to kind of give up what they were doing. And even in real estate B school, I mean, I convinced a few of my key players to give up something they were doing to join what I was doing. And it really is that vision. So if you're not clear on where you want this thing to be in 3 or 10 years, I mean, I was very clear, 3, 5, 10. And I pretty much, even though it looks a little different now, in 2020, in 2009, I wrote my 2020 plan, and I'll beat it, and that was like 11 years ago.
Now you'll beat it, but I bet the strategy that worked for you probably looks a little bit different than what you wrote in 2009. But how far you got does not look. You actually got further, right? So I think people are worried like, man, I don't have the perfect how we're going to get there kind of thing. And it doesn't matter. Like I've drawn out every day. I mean, I'm not even kidding. My people are like, Tim, you're changing every day. But every day I get a new learning, a new understanding. I'm like, oh yeah, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to do this. We're actually going to get there by doing this thing or making this tweak. And so over time, the vision changes, it evolves, but from day one, if you can have it so big and so long-term, you're looking long-term and you're committed to that, it doesn't matter if it changes and evolves because people will change and evolve with you as long as you stay committed to the ultimate North Star and ultimately where you're going in the big picture. So That's big. But yeah, another thing with talent that we learned along the way, is talent speaks the language of accountability and achievement, and non-talent speaks the language of victimhood. And so that's a big one for me. And that one is something that I keep on my mind more for people that are already in my company than necessarily when hiring. When I'm listening constantly for language of victimhood, like I can't do this because X, or whatever excuses, or the world's against me, or somebody else is against me, versus accountability, self-driven accountability is totally different. It's we're going to get there. I'm going to do this thing because I'm taking matters into my own hands. And I'm constantly listening for the way in which people talk, and the ones that speak the language of accountability and achievement are the ones that get my time. And the ones that speak the language of victimhood, it's not that I go fire them. It's just that I kind of stiff arm myself a little bit. I don't want to be near that. And obviously, the less and less time I spend with that person, the quicker they're going to be out the door, or the quicker they're going to change and start getting on board. But I tend to distance myself from those that do not speak the language of accountability and achievement. And of course, people rarely speak language of victimhood in the interview process, which is why, when you're looking for talent, it's very rare that you bring on a rock star. It's a lot more common that you bring on, a B or a C player that looked and felt like a rock star in the interview process. And so that again goes back to potential versus even emerging. Even emerging talent has a bit of a track record that you can look back and say, regardless of anything they said, that proved it. That thing that they did proved what I'm looking for. Everybody is going to show up their best in the interview process, but if you can go back and specifically point to where they proved it in the thing you're hiring them to do, it's a total game changer. If you go back and point and prove it in something else that they did, it might be comparable, but it might not be. I've hired rock star athletes who, got to the top of their game in college football or the Olympics or, different things like that. And they just don't bring it in the workplace. And then, by the way, Matt, who is the president of our company here, was a college athlete, captain of his college football team. And the guy brings it every minute of his freaking life. So it's not to say that college athletes don't bring it, but I've seen them both. Just because they brought it in this one area doesn't mean that they're going to bring it in the same way every single day in this other area. And so one of the big lessons I learned in hiring is to stop rolling the dice so much on hires and to really put pressure up front on bringing on people that have already proven whatever it is that I'm looking for very specifically. And that's helped tremendously.
Yeah. I want to touch a little bit on, and it goes to core values. Real estate is one of those industries where, you just decide in your mind one day that you're going to start a business, and then you're the CEO, and then, here you go. And it's like, whoa, you're taking people's lives into you're literally bringing people's lives into your world. And it's a huge responsibility when you start doing that. I want to take you back a little bit. To earn the right to even start a team, you've got to produce at a certain level. You've got to be accountable and disciplined and run a schedule. Talk about when you built up to 100 listings, what was your daily schedule like? You talk about 6 a.m., you talk about also guarding your weekends, was it 6 to 9? Was it like,
let's look at that. So the first thing is, when I finally made the decision that I was going to be a realtor, when I finally in my head, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing here. I decided that I'm not going to, I asked myself, like, what are the things that are bothering my ego, or what's bothering me about the fact that I'm going to go do this? And I started thinking about it, and I thought, man, like the realtors that I knew growing up, my parents' friends, or my friends' parents, one of the problems is they were always on the phone. Like, they would get up from the dinner table and go take a call. And on Saturday, they would, like, the family's doing this, but they're over there showing a house or whatever it was. And And I thought, one of the big things is I don't want to, just because I'm going to be in real estate, live this different lifestyle, this different career and personal deal. Like I want to be a business professional, and I want to work business hours, and I want to have a family and a life, and I want that to happen also. And so I kind of made that mental decision early on. And so for me, what that looked like is in the early days, I was a single guy. I was dating who's my wife now, but she lived in Dallas. She was going to graduate school 3 hours north of Austin. And so I had the flexibility, just given where I was in my life, to work, all in Monday through Friday. But Saturday, Sunday, I'd go up to Dallas or she'd come to Austin. And so that was a commitment for me from day one of I'm not going to be working on the weekends. So right off the bat, I had to make some calls. Number one, I've only closed, Lars, I've only closed 18 buyers in my entire career. So from day one, I basically made the commitment that I wasn't going to be out there doing open houses and running around, opening up doors for people at their beckoning call and that type of deal because I wasn't going to be around on weekends. I remember my first couple of years, I stacked up hundreds of sign calls that it's embarrassing, but I didn't do anything with them. I didn't answer them. I often didn't even return the phone calls because I knew what was going to happen is if I was successful in calling and talking to that person, it meant I was going to go out and open up a bunch of doors. And that wasn't, that wouldn't fall in line with what I'd committed to. So one of the reasons that I was so disciplined Monday through Friday comes from that commitment that I wasn't going to work on the weekends. So what that meant was I had to really bring it Monday through Friday. So, and I had to really, really bring it in the listing game if I was going to make this thing work. And so what I did was just that. I think who you surround yourself with is key. We talk about that a lot in business, right? And I eventually got out of living in my parents' basement, and I moved in with my friend from college who is a home builder, and he works with his three older brothers, and he just the way that they operate is that they all get to the office at about 5:30 in the morning. That's just the way that they operated. And so if I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, he wasn't even at the house. I mean, he was gone. And so I already felt like a slob right off the bat at 5:30 in the morning. And so I think that just that alone, like being that, I would come home at let's say I come home at 7:00. Guess he's already in bed, literally in bed with the lights out, watching TV or whatever he's doing, because he knows what time he's got to get up the next day. Whereas I think most people my age at 21 years old, if they do have a roommate, they're not in bed at 7:00. Their roommate is probably going to bed at midnight or, 11 or whatever. And I think that I lucked into having a roommate who, and if I could go back, I would say, go be purposeful about, if you're 21 years old getting into business, go be purposeful about your roommate is somebody like that, because if Jesse was staying up late, I guarantee you I would have been staying up later. I would have been waking up later. I would have been showing up at the office later. But instead, I was getting in early, and not everybody can do that. It depends on your stage in life. But for me, I was able to go all in Monday through Friday. I was all out Saturday, Sunday. So I was at the office, my call list, 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. I prep my call list, go through my scripts, get everything all ready to roll. By about 7:45, 8 a.m. at the absolute latest, I was on the phones, and I would make calls from 8 to 11 every single day. In the early days, I made calls all day, Lars. I had no systems, I had no confidence, I had no skills. I was so bad. For me to even generate one lead, it would take me like 10 hours. It was so bad. But over time, over the course of time, I developed systems, I developed skills, I developed confidence. And I think those are the three things that actually, that made me better. And with all that, I was able to become more efficient. I eventually got it to where 8 to 11, I was on the phone, hunting for new business. And then every day, no matter what, at 11 o'clock, no matter what, at 11 o'clock, I stopped and I did my follow-up. And that was a key winner for me, because over time, that 11 to 12 hour is where I set all my appointments. Because what I was doing is I was never really like a hard closer or this like amazing sales person. But what I was good at is being consistent with the things that mattered most. And, and so if people told me that, yeah, we're thinking about moving next May, I was making note of that. They were going in a CRM, and I knew they would laugh. I'd say, okay, I'll call you in a year. And they'd laugh. They go, okay, call me in a year. And then sure enough, literally 12 months later, they get this phone call from me, and I say, hey, it's Tim. We talked a year ago. You told me that you were planning on moving, and you said X, Y, and Z. And they would laugh, and they would be like, I cannot believe that you're calling me right now. And yes, we are still planning on moving. Our plans changed. Not going to be for a couple more months, but if you're willing to call us back in a couple more months, we're still willing to do this. And what would happen was I had no competition with that business, because all my competition was in the now business, right? But what really did it for me was having that schedule that I stuck to day in and day out. Even when my business fell apart, Lars, in 2012, the one thing I never stopped doing was following that schedule. 8 to 11, generating new business. 11 to 12, getting in there and doing my follow-up. And then from 12 o'clock on, every day looked different. It was, if I had appointments, I'd go on appointments. If I didn't, I'd get back on the phones. If I, maybe I was interviewing, maybe I was 12 to whenever I was able to finish, was whatever it needed to be. Because of my 8 to 12 every day, because of the consistency there, my afternoons told me what I needed to do, right? It was like my mornings where I had to decide what I'm going to do. My afternoons were just whatever my calendar tells me I needed to do.
Yeah, that is, man, that's $1 million for someone listening. Because if you don't have that down yourself and you start to let people into your life where you don't have that structure or discipline, or it's not like you made the calls because you were good at them or you even liked them. You knew it was just a means to an end. It was not forever. You could do anything for 2 or 3 years until you get good enough. You got to get good enough at the thing, build a system around it, so then you can get out of the thing. And I don't think people do that. I think they just start a team because they're sick of real estate.
Right. And that's a problem for sure. I love what you said earlier, which is, I don't remember how you said it specifically, but it is a responsibility when you hire somebody. You're literally taking not just them, but their entire family's livelihood. You're kind of taking a sense of responsibility for that. And I certainly didn't see it that way originally, but I definitely see it that way now. And it's that makes it, make it a bit of a nerve-wracking thing. And you've got to have your act together before you bring somebody else into that world.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's dig into the current business real quick. Give us the complexion of the team. What does this year look like in terms of production? What do you think you'll hit? And then maybe what was the 10-year journey? I know you did 15, 20 deals.
Yep.
When did you break the 100 mark? How long in, and it's funny. My last closing was January 2012. I think you said yours was 2012.
No. Mine was 5 years ago. Mine was probably end of 13. So, okay. But likely, I think we both kind of you probably understood it better than I did, but eventually I think we both came to the conclusion of, if we're going to build a business, then, let's spend more and more time focusing on how to make that environment the right place. Go be a business leader and stop being a producer.
For sure. So what does the business look like today?
So today it's we have 7 tight real estate teams in 7 different local markets, and each team is run by a team leader, and the team has anywhere between 7 and 10 agents that are a part of that team, and we run it all. We've kind of built our technology platform that we facilitate, that all of our agents operate their business on. We facilitate transaction management, call center services, all the pieces. Our goal is to automate 80% of their jobs so that they can focus on going out and being the best real estate agent they could possibly be. And so that's at HQ here, headquarters here in Austin, where we kind of build those systems and facilitate that process. And we'll probably do 12 to 14 million in GCI this year, which is twice as much as we did last year, which was twice as much as we did the year before that, which was twice as much as we did the year before that. So, we're continuing on this path of doubling. And, one of the big tweaks that we made this year, though, that has really changed our business quite a bit is we made the decision ultimately together to only be in business with the top 20% of our local markets that we're in. And so part of that was making sure that people that we had in our organization that weren't there got there really quick, or that we parted ways with them. And going forward, we only get in business with that top tier. And that's changed the game for us. It's changed the type of value we provide to our agents. It's changed the culture. It's changed a lot of things, but very intentionally for us. We used to be an organization that trained new agents, and we've migrated away from that. And we are an organization today that is really focused on being hyper local experts and adding as much value as we possibly can for the consumer. The environment is changing so much in real estate today, and our goal is to build ninja teams of real estate agents that are adding the most value possible to the end consumer. And our goal is to take away anything that doesn't add value to the consumer, take that off their plates so that they can go spend their time doing that.
Awesome. Tell me, when I say business is 80% psychology, what does that mean to you?
Business is 80% psychology. Well, I would say, and I'm curious to have this conversation, I would say that business is 80% communication. And so when I hear you say business is 80% psychology, I'm thinking the way that people think and interact with each other based on how they think. So, which ultimately is communication with yourself, and then communication with other people based on that. And so, everything in business is just conversations, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think how you think and how you approach situations and relationships, ultimately will determine the trajectory of the business.
Yeah, I like it. And you mentioned something earlier, and I had this moment. It was a tough moment for me when I realized that I was using my team, to further my goals. And once you make that shift, how can I serve you versus you serve me? Yes. You didn't quite say it that way, but there's something that you said, and it's not I guess you got there quicker than I did. I mean, it took me probably 7 or 8 years to realize that I was just building. I wasn't really serving the folks that were on my team. And it sounds like you got there in 3 years.
Well, it hit me in the face like a
that's
ton
awesome.
Of bricks.
It's like, here, read this.
Yeah, exactly. So it made me totally rethink that whole deal. And I just started to realize, and also just, having a lot of really good mentors around me. I feel really, really blessed to be a young guy that has had so many older, more mature men and women just be able to speak into me about their failures or regrets or frustrations along the way. And, been able to, I think that's really sped me up in a lot of ways, having those relationships.
Yeah. And you're still only 27, so you got a lot of years ahead of you. So that's awesome. Tell me when I say, and I've struggled with this, and I think a lot of business owners struggle with enjoying the ride. You opened up with it, and I love it. How do you make sure that this is a fun process for you? Because I think a lot of people struggle. They just want to get to the end game. They're sick of their business.
Yeah.
How do you enjoy the ride?
So a couple things come to mind. I am definitely prone to, I'm not the guy that likes to celebrate every little win along the way or every little piece. In fact, when we have a huge win, my initial reaction is that thing isn't important to me anymore, because I recognized that we were going to win that like a year ago, and I was already focused on the next thing. So by the time we actually achieve a result, I don't typically get excited about it, which is a sickness, which is how we end up being dissatisfied, never-endingly, dissatisfied and always focused on the end game instead of the journey. So a couple of things come to mind. Number one, I've developed a habit of journaling, and I use Evernote. I use it on my phone. I do this. Sometimes I'll sit in my car when I pull up to work and do it if I didn't do it in the morning before I got here. But I journal a couple of things. I journal prayers for the day. I journal gratitude. I journal intentions for the day. And then at the end of the day, I have a reminder that comes up on my phone that pings me to journal kind of just an assessment of the day. And this is an opportunity again for gratitude, and also to just say, what went well, what didn't go well, what can be better tomorrow. And it kind of preps me for being able to set intentions tomorrow. But it's just something that I've built a habit around that forces me to pause, and that's been really helpful. Another thing is just, I think, having a wife who is like interested in my happiness, but pretty disinterested in like what I do specifically, I think really helps. She's super interested in the relationship aspect of my business. Always asks me about the people, about different scenarios going on, my people's spouses, my people's families, and is super interested in that. And also emotionally, she's super interested in how I'm feeling, good or bad. But the actual like achievements of real estate or building a business or anything, like she could care less. And so I think number one, it definitely like it keeps me grounded, but it more importantly like pushes me to focus on those pieces which I'm not naturally prone to focus on. So when I go home, and what we talk about is the things that I'm prone to ignore, the emotions, the relationships, the people, when I'm prone to think about the goals and the achievements and the strategy. I think it helps me to spend more time, so again, going back to who are you surrounding yourself with, and are they making you better? And I think that my wife does that in a lot of ways to help me enjoy and appreciate a lot of the things that I would normally just look past.
Yeah. All awesome stuff. I can go another 2 hours, and I've got a couple more questions for you, then I'll let you crush your day.
Yeah.
Tell me, what keeps you up at night with your business now?
What keeps me up at night is that the way in which we do real estate today will not be the way in which we do real estate 15 years from now, probably not 10 years from now, maybe not even 5 years from now. And so what keeps me up at night is making sure that the people that I set out to serve and empower every day, which are my real estate agents, that I'm leading them down the best possible path to evolve with where the future of our industry is headed, to lead that charge. And it's complicated, it's confusing, it's unknown, and but the one thing that I do know is that it is changing, and it is going to be different. And doing what's best for 10 years from now is not necessarily doing what's best for today, and doing what's best for today is not what's best for 10 years from now. And so balancing what works well today and where we need to be tomorrow is something I love to think about and work on. And it's a challenge, and it's definitely what I think about when I'm laying in bed at night.
Awesome. Tell me, what's the best advice you've received about business?
Oh man, I don't think I can answer that on the spot because I've received such great advice. I think that one thing, I'll give two ones that instantly come to mind. Anytime you're butting up against a ceiling or feeling frustrated in business, you're missing a relationship. That would be the first one. And it sounds so basic, but here's the thing. There's probably things that you're butting up against right now. I know there's things that I'm butting up against right now that I'm frustrated with. And my instant reaction is to try and think through a different strategy, to try and think through a better way to do it. When in reality, the very art or the very nature of building a business is such that when you come up against a roadblock, that your first question is to ask who, not what or how, but who can go solve this. I always eventually get to who, but I usually waste a bunch of time trying to figure out my own strategy, my own process first. And then eventually I realize I can't keep maintaining this myself. Somebody else has got to come in, and then they go rewire it anyway. And so, getting to who first is a big one. And then the other one I would say is I guess a better way to say this is when you're doing all that you can do and you're still hitting a ceiling, you need a new relationship. Whether it's replacing or adding. So the other big thing would just be about forcing growth for success. And I think I've mentioned this before. with you, Lars, and that's just that most of us are trying to succeed. We're trying to grow. We're trying to get a bigger business, and so we force growth for success. And the best possible way to build an impactful, long-lasting, sustaining business and environment would be to force success, or excuse me, to allow the success that you're having to force your growth. So focus on building something that is impactful, that is worth growing, and that will force the growth versus waking up every day and going, how can we grow? How can we get bigger? How can we do more? Actually focusing on value over growth, and the value will drive the growth.
Awesome. Really good. What's one book you'd recommend to our listeners?
Ooh, I'm pulling up my Audible right now to try and pick the best one. I would say there is a book called Powerful, which is written by the head of HR for Netflix. That is really, really good. And there's a book called Exponential Organizations, which will help real estate agents think about the types of businesses that are entering our space today, that I think will be really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let me see. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Lots of things. One thing that comes to mind instantly, if I had to do it all over again, I didn't think of myself as a business person truly until about 3.5, almost 4 years in. And I was thinking like a producer. And the truth of the matter is I made cold call, prospected homeowners in my city for almost 4 years straight. And I think if I would have been thinking more like a business owner early on, I would have probably only needed to do it for about 2 years. After about 2 years, I think I was already making enough money and had enough process in place that I could have started getting myself out of it and putting other people in it. But I was thinking about how can I do more versus thinking about it from like a business.
Awesome. There's someone that's going to listen to this podcast that's really struggling right now. What are some words of encouragement you can give them?
If you came down to Austin, Texas today and walked around my business, you would laugh and realize how messy everything is at any given stage. No matter how successful anybody's business is, it's an absolute mess. And I've seen extremely successful businesses kind of peek behind the curtain and realize how messy it is. You got the wrong people in seats. You've got strategies that aren't working. You've got all kinds of mess. So whatever you're doing, if you're struggling and it's messy, that's not a bad thing. I would say, as long as every day you are getting downfield. So I always think of it like a football field, and I think going back to what I said at the very beginning of this call is focus on winning the day. You've got to be crystal clear about what is it that's going to get me downfield 5 yards. If I get 5 yards today and I get 5 yards tomorrow and I get 5 yards the next day, or even 1 yard, what is that one thing? And decide before the day starts and be real with yourself and did you do it or did you not do it? Did you get downfield or not? Because we can be busy and work 14 hours a day and never get downfield. Focus on winning the day every day, and also just rest in the fact that your business is going to be messy. It's always going to be messy as you're growing, and that's okay.
Awesome, man. Tim, you are just a good dude. I mean, just when just the way you speak so honestly and open is really admirable. And I think not enough of that is in our industry. There's a lot of guys and gals out there that it's image and it's ego. And I think if folks would just speak a little bit more truth, I think we'd all have a better journey. So
I appreciate you. I see the same thing in you, Lars, and I always get energy from our conversations as well.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. And you'll be in Austin in May 15th, I think, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So I will see you there. And Real Estate B School, thanks to you, the Business Freedom Podcast listeners. Thank you. And everyone just go out there and, like Tim said, it's just winning the day. I mean, that's so simple. And that's all you have control over, really, is a day at a time. So love you, brother. Appreciate you. And we'll talk soon.
Absolutely, man. Talk soon.
Thanks.